Welcome back to the Gary Sutton Show on WSBA, our final half hour. And I'm always excited to have our next guest on. He's Dr. Walter E. Williams. He's an economics professor, columnist, author, political analyst, sit-in host, former taxi cab driver, and always a great contributor to our show. Dr. Williams, good morning to you.
Good morning to you, Gary.
And first of all, congratulations. I just found out you're a newly minted grandfather, right?
Yeah, as of last Thursday.
And a little boy, right?
Yeah, little boy, yeah. And so being newly minted just means that my money is divided another way.
Okay. Well, great to have you in this morning. You wrote, I thought, a brilliant article yesterday, Dependency, Not Poverty, that was out there in Town Hall and other places as well. But I can imagine anyone who in Washington read the very first statement in this is probably still shrieking today when you said, there is no material poverty in the United States.
Oh, that is absolutely right. I cited statistics in that column that shows that I think something like 60 to if you have the column in front of you.
I do.
It's like 60% or 60-some% of poor people that the Census Department calls poor, they own one car.
Yep.
And I think 14% own two or more cars.
Well, basically what you have in there, you have 80% of poor households have air conditioning, nearly three-quarters have a car or truck, 31% have two or more, two-thirds have cable or satellite TV, half have one or more computers, 42% own their homes. Poor Americans have more living space than the typical non-poor person in Sweden, France, or the UK.
That's right. No, and so what I'm saying in the column is that there is not material poverty in our country. That is, we don't find anything like what you see in Ethiopia, Bangladesh, and Somalia, and places like this. Now, what we do have in our country is a poverty of the spirit, and that is where people have chosen to live, pathological lives, and they've chosen to be dependent, and this dependency is it's subsidized and it's encouraged by the welfare state.
You know, it's interesting to me, and I taught history for a few years, 25 years actually, and one of the things that I found myself always teaching when I taught the Constitution was the idea that we have rights with responsibility, and the idea that we do have responsibilities as citizens for our own lives. And so it seems to me that the lesson that we teach now in general in society is that we have freedom with irresponsibility, freedom regardless of our exercise of responsibility or not. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, it is, and it's even baser than that, and that is the message given to Americans in general and poor people in particular that you have the right to live at the expense of somebody else.
Yes,
that is, if you don't want to work. You can get food stamps, you can get welfare, and somebody else has to pay for it. And another thing that's in the column that most people do not know at all, and that is the makeup of the poverty rate in our country.
Yes.
And it points out in the column that the poverty rate among Black Americans is 35%.
Yes.
Among whites, it's 13%. Now, the statistic that you don't hear much about is that the poverty rate among black married families has been in the single digits for more than 2 decades.
Currently at 8%.
Yes, currently at 8%, and the poverty rate among married white families is around 5%. So it seems like the big cause, one of the major causes of poverty and dependency is people will have babies out of wedlock, and it turns out for Black Americans, 72% of Black babies are born each year without the benefit of two parents, and among whites, it's 30%. And so that's almost a guarantee of poverty and dependence. I mean, you don't want to be a prude or anything like that, but if you're born and you find that your mother is 16 years old, you don't know who or where your father is, your grandmother is 30, that's not the best start in life.
And we're going to talk about that because you make a point about that a little bit later on. But the question you posed in that particular part of the article, you said, whose fault is it to have children without the benefit of marriage and risk a life of dependency? Do people have free will, or are they governed by instincts? I think that's one of the most salient questions right now to what's going on in America.
That's right, and the tragedy of it, I point out that it's a politically incorrect question. That is, if you ask that question, you're condemned. As a matter of fact, I was on a television show. I think it was Face the Nation. Oh, this was maybe during the middle '80s, and this lady, it was a panel, and this lady was with 6 kids or some number like this, and she was saying to the group. The panel, that she does not have enough money for her kids. And so I asked her, well, did you ever think that you have too many kids for your money? I mean, that is, it's not like you're walking down the street and all of a sudden there's a bolt of lightning comes and lo and behold, you're pregnant. I mean, you have to actually do something.
Yeah, there is something you have to do to that, last I checked, except for one time in history, and that was a little fair. Yeah,
that's right. That's right. Absolutely right. So, but however, people don't hold people accountable for their behavior. And I'm 77 years old, and when I was a young kid living in the Richard Allen Housing Project, if a girl had a baby out of wedlock, she was an embarrassment to the family. Yeah. She was sent down south to live with her relative, live with her grandmother or aunt or something like this. But today, people have babies and out of wedlock, and they have a baby shower.
One of the things that you talked about in here that's amazing, and you said, okay, so a lot of people say today that the black illegitimacy rate is only 14% in 1940. And you mentioned your friend Dr. Soul reporting, do we find that census data going back 100 years when blacks were just one generation out of slavery, showing that a slightly higher percentage of black adults had married than white adults? So this fact remained true in every census from 1890 to 1940. So is anyone willing to advance the argument that the reason the illegitimacy rate among blacks was lower and marriage rates higher in early periods was there was less racial discrimination and greater opportunity, one generation removed from being slaves?
That is utter nonsense. If people made that argument, and matter of fact, in a book that I wrote a couple of years ago, it's called Race and Economics, and I point out, I give statistics from the 1870s in cities like Detroit, Philadelphia, and New York, and other cities where 80% of black kids live in two-parent families, compared to today, only 30% live in two-parent families. As a matter of fact, in 1925, Harlem, 85% of black kids lived in two-parent families. So what we see today has, a lot of sociologists will say, oh, well, the breakup of the black families due to slavery is due to discrimination, et cetera, et cetera. Well, that doesn't even pass the smell test because you have to answer the question, how come black families or families in America in general, whether they're black or white, were far more stable in earlier periods than they are today?
So the question then is, and I'll ask you right here, because this isn't in the article, why? Why are we at that point with a specific population here in our society where it's almost standard to say, well, you just have a one-parent family? Why is that?
Well, I think what happens is that almost any economist, whether he's liberal or conservative, I think he will agree that if you tax something, you're going to get less of it. Mm-hmm. And if you subsidize something, you're going to get more of it. You're going to get surpluses of it. We subsidize wheat, and we get surpluses of wheat. But what we've been doing, we've been subsidizing slovenly behavior, and you're going to find slovenly behavior to increase. That is, in a sense, what we tell a young lady is, look, you can, you're living in a bad household, your brother's in trouble, your mother's there, and she brings in drunks and stuff like this. And what the government tells this young girl, look, you can be emancipated. You can get food stamps. You can get a housing subsidy. You can get a check every month on the condition that you have a baby. And that can be tempting.
Yes, it can be. And because now you say, oh, well, I can behave the way I want to, and they're going to pay me for it?
Oh, that is absolutely right. And what we do to poor people we would never do to our own kids. For example, how many listeners out there would say, if they had a daughter who was 16 years old, she made a mistake and had a baby, and they say to the daughter, look, here's a $500 check. Come back next month. Do what you want, smoke pot and watch TV, and come back next month and you get another $500. And if you mess up again, you get $600. No, nobody would do that to anybody that we loved or cared about, but we do that to poor people.
It's the biggest lie, I think, visited by our government on this country. I was looking this week, Michael Goodwin wrote a great article out there, Obama Democrats' troubling view on work. And one of the things he said, last week's remarkable exchange over Obamacare began when the head of the nonpartisan CBO reported that the interplay of taxes and subsidies in the law, quote, creates a disincentive for people to work, unquote. And the report predicted the mix would lead to fewer hours. So along comes Jay Carney stepping out there and saying, opportunity created by affordable quality health insurance allows families in America to make a decision about how they will work or if they will work. And Harry Reid and Nancy Pelosi come out and applaud the law for freeing people from job lock, quote unquote, whatever the heck that is.
Good. Yeah.
So I'm sitting there thinking now, I may just quit work and go join this. It looks like a pretty good deal to me. But you know what? The dirty little secret is it's also based on the idea that there's a bunch of us dunderheads out there that are still going to keep on working to pay for 100% of the services in this country.
Oh, you're absolutely right. And people would not make those kind of decisions not to work if not working meant starvation.
Right.
But not working does not mean starvation. Not working means that you live out of my pocket and your pocket.
And that's not the way we do it. And thus we have the redistributionist policies that we're seeing with this government that, well, you're going to pay a little bit more. And they always say the rich are going to pay a little bit more. And I always say, take out rich, insert people in the middle somewhere. They're always paying a little bit more for this.
Yeah, that's right. That is people who work. They're going to get taxed, and the tax is being paid by the rich. I mean, the government just could not run itself unless they were able to tap in this huge number of people that we call middle income people.
Now, one of the great statements you make in this article, and again, for people who are looking for the article out there, it's called Dependency, Not Poverty. You can actually go to townhall.com and check it out under Walter Williams, or you can go to walterwilliams.com. But
Walter E. Williams.
Walter E. Williams. Sorry, I got to get that E right because I forget that. But you'd say that there may be some people who, let's see, no one can blame a person if he starts out poor in life, because how one starts out is not his fault. But then you go on to make another great statement there. Tell us about that.
Okay. Well, I point out that to not be poor is not rocket science. That is, there are a few things that you have to do to avoid long-term poverty. I point out that, well, first, graduate from high school.
Mm-hmm.
Then, second, get married before you have children and stay married. Third, work at any kind of job, even one that starts out paying the minimum wage. And then finally, avoid engaging in criminal behavior. And if you do those kind of things, you're not going to be poor. And for example, I point out there that the Census Bureau defines poverty for a family of two as $15,500. But however, a married couple earning the minimum wage would earn an annual combined income of $30,000. They would not be poor. And I also point out that there is no adult. I doubt whether you could find any adult who would work for the minimum wage for more than 2 or 3 months, because you always will move up a little bit. So all I'm saying is that, well, gee, if you take those 4 steps, that is, graduate from high school, get married before you have children and stay married, work at any kind of job, and stay and don't engage in criminal behavior, you're not going to be part of the poverty crowd.
And by the way, the poverty line also is $23,000 for a family of 4, so you're still $7,000 above that if 2 members of the family just work a minimum wage to start out with. But I like the fact that you said if you stay poor, blame yourself. I mean, because, none of us are given you don't know what we're born into. I don't know. You could tell people a little bit about where you started and where you came to. I said, one of the things you shared on our show before, you said you were a taxi driver at one point in time.
Oh, yeah, I drove a taxi.
And they didn't let you become the head of the company right away when you stepped in?
No, they didn't do that for me. They just gave me a uniform. And from 1957, I was driving a taxi. And you don't get rich, but you're not poor. And matter of fact, I've been working since I was 12 years old, shining shoes, delivering packages, et cetera, and sweeping floors. And my stepfather used to tell me, he would say that any kind of job is better than stealing or begging.
Yeah.
That's not a value today.
Yeah, there's a dignity in work that we once valued, and it seems now that there is, a dignity in staying home. It's a scary thought. We're going to come back, Dr. Williams, just a very quick break, and I want to ask you about the numbers at the end of your column because they are staggering.
Okay.
And what those all mean. Dr. Walter E. Williams with us here on the Gary Sutton Show. Please read the column. Dependency, not poverty. Go to walterewilliams.com or you can go to townhall.com. You'll find it anywhere. You can go to Drudge Report if you want to and go all the way down to Columnist. He's on there as well. Dr. Walter E. Williams back right after this on the Gary Sutton Show on WSBA. Dependency, not poverty. You can see it at drwalterewilliams.com or also at townhall.com. Dr. Williams, I'm reading through this article, and all of a sudden at the end, I'm reading the piece. You talked about when President Lyndon Johnson declared war on poverty. The nation has spent $18 trillion since then.
Yes, since that time. $18 trillion at the federal, state, and local levels of government. And some people put it closer to $20 trillion.
A lot of us kick those words around today, billions and trillions and all that kind of stuff. It's become almost meaningless. But you break it down to the point that it starts to make some sense.
Yeah, right. I point out, I didn't update the column, but I point out that in my 1995 column, I point out that the nation at that time had spent $5.4 trillion on poverty.
Right.
And $5.4 trillion, people can't relate to that.
Nope.
But let's tell you what it could buy in 1995. $5.4 trillion could have purchased every single U.S. factory, all manufacturing equipment, every office building in the nation. And I point out with what's left over, you could buy every airline, every trucking company, and our entire commercial maritime fleet. And you could also buy every television station and radio station and power company and real estate and wholesale stores in the nation. Now, today's $18 trillion. Now, keep in mind that our GDP, all that we produce as a nation, that includes airplanes, cars, and everything, our GDP comes to something over $16 trillion. So what that means, the amount of money that we have spent, the nation has spent since the war on poverty, $18 trillion, that could buy the entire output of the richest nation on the face of this earth. And then you have some left over. And so people who say, well, we're not spending enough money on poverty. Well, should we have spent $40 trillion or how much should we have spent? And and I believe $18 trillion is the total amount is more than most countries in the world combined.
So we come down to this question. As I was sitting there reading the column, here's my one question I said. If we're spending $18 trillion on poverty, why do we still have poverty?
Well, one of the reasons is that it turns out, I did another study, that if you take each year the amount of money that's spent on poverty and just gave it to poor people, that the federal, state, and local level, just give it to poor. Each poor family of four would have something like $35,000. Now, it turns out they're not getting it. So where's the money going? Well, it's going to the poverty pimps. That is, the people who get GS-15 jobs to manage the poor, professors who get $500,000 grants to do study on poverty and have meetings in Miami at a nice hotel to talk about the poor. And, this is like, helping the way they want to help the poor is like, I don't know whether you people have a rural background, but it's like feeding the sparrows through the horses. Now,
yeah, got the idea on that.
Now, if you're a horse, that's the way to feed the sparrows.
Jeez. Dr. Williams, great having you in this morning. Always a pleasure. I hope people read the column. And, again, congratulations on the new granddad status.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Take care. Dr. Walter E. Williams here on the Gary Sutton Show. And, again, the column, read it. Dependency, not poverty. I don't care what side you're on. It's still a lot of great common sense. By the way, our words of wisdom, they come from Harry S. Truman. The president hears 100 voices telling him that he is the greatest man in the world. He must listen carefully, indeed, to hear the one voice that tells him he is not. Tomorrow on the Gary Sutton Show, we started out with Chris Markowski at 9:05, and we'll also pick up then at 10:05 Dr. G. Terry Madonna, and, of course, at 11:05, Clark Hodge is with us tomorrow on a very busy show on the Gary Sutton Show. We'll also keep our eye on the weather for you and keep you updated to the moment. Have a great day, everyone. Be safe out there. It's high noon.